All right, let's get this started. So thanks everybody for joining us. This promises to be a fun, provocative, yet respectful debate about the state of soft tissue robotics, and especially open versus closed, and what it means to the ecosystem. And what I mean by ecosystem is not just the surgeon and patient, but the sites of care, the entrepreneurs, the investment community, and the rate of acceleration of technologies. So I'll go down the panel here, and they'll each introduce themselves and maybe share the relevance of their experience for this panel. Greg, you want to go first?
Yeah, so Greg Roche, CEO of Distalmotion. Distalmotion is a soft tissue robotic company based in Switzerland. We've had CE for the past 3 years, and we're given de novo approval for inguinal hernia in October of this year. So open platform. Look forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Oliver?
Yeah, great to be back at LSI and delighted to be here on this panel. Oliver Keown, CEO of Oaf Surgical, a startup company that is reinventing outpatient surgery and value-based surgery through a network of high-performance surgeons and Oaf ASCs. With a vertical AI layer across that. We're in stealth and coming out shortly, but think representing, with my background, started off as a physician, been in the world of surgical innovation for 15 years. The last 5 of those at Intuitive Surgical, leading and launching the venture capital arm there, and seeing where surgical excellence is headed, and I believe firmly it's outpatient. I think there are incredible opportunities to align value, outcomes, experience, and at a fraction of the cost. And so as I think about the future of technology, I think about the drivers of value in that setting and the opportunity for new care models.
Excellent. Scott?
Hi, Scott Huennekens, former CEO of Verb Surgical, before that Volcano in the interventional space, and now on a number of different boards and involved in robots or digital, what I would call surgery platforms, orthopedics, dental, as well as soft tissue.
Great. All right, let's start at the top so we can level set here. Scott, I'll start with you and then we'll run down the line. How would you define an open versus closed soft tissue robotic platform, just for the audience so we can level set?
Well, when I was running Verb, my vision, and I think the right vision is there's no difference. So you have a robot that can control an instrument, whether it's an open procedure, a closed procedure, or a hybrid procedure. And so it's finding the right tool for the clinician, given the circumstance that's required during the procedure. And there are procedures that part of it can be open, part of it can be closed. And I think in that regard, and then I think in terms of I never even liked the term robotic surgery. I always preferred digital surgery, and thinking in terms of a platform where you have the robot, you have the instruments, you have connectivity, and you have data and the ability to have analytics for precision guidance, just like you would program, a CNC machine. You can eventually, in a future state, program different steps in a surgical procedure. But it takes the totality of a system, not just the robot. But the robot enables that to occur.
Oliver?
I would echo that, but actually expand it further. I don't know if any systems today are truly open or truly closed, because I think it really is about the surgical episode of care. I think what happens in the operating room is a portion of that continuity of care that starts, kind of in the pre-op phase and through to recovery. I do think that it's, in the context of this conversation, it's about what is the superpowers of any medical innovator in terms of technology in the operating room, and then what is the kind of collection of capabilities that it's offering to the end customer, which is the healthcare system, the surgeon. So I think about it in the kind of context of the breadth and depth of capabilities and how they align to the value drivers in that setting of care, which I will, over the course of this conversation get to, I think are very different when you think of outpatient surgical care versus hospital-based surgery.
Joe, maybe to clarify what I was saying is, with all those elements of the platform, you can mix and match and take best in class instruments, best in class AI program for something, and they can all work. Like back to, the iPhone, open platform. I can run Uber on it. I can run Lyft on it. I can run Strava on it. And now it creates a multiplier effect that snowballs. And when you limit platforms and close them from an application standpoint, I think you limit the potential for them as we go forward. And that's been a frustration of mine across all of these different implementations of digital surgery platforms, robots, whether it's orthopedic, dental, ORs, EP labs, you name it. We could be going faster and better if we had open platforms where people had the opportunity to develop applications that could be used on it. We did that at Volcano. We ended up having over 25 apps on our system. Boston had 3. St. Jude had 3. We ended up with 70% share. We had more developers of software could work on the platform, have a way to get to market without having to do everything. And I think we're doing a disservice to the patient by not having that kind of environment. Epic's another, classic example. We're all familiar with the frustration of getting data and having a closed platform.
Greg?
Yeah, I would say choice is the difference between open and closed, in my opinion. So you have to have some core technology at the root to create an ecosystem in any environment. But when you close something down, and we've talked about this at length, and I know we'll probably talk about it, there's multiple verticals within a robotic platform, almost impossible. I think that's one of the lessons I learned in my history in robotics is to be the master of everything is an impossibility. And we can talk about, what those are, but to give, caregivers, surgeons, hospitals, the ability to choose the right technology. And I actually think, you can build a better ecosystem by picking and choosing, best-in-class technologies around that site of care. Like I said, I think when you try to have some kind of a closed loop, you really limit the offering in the long term. So I think it provides a lot of choice and optionality for people to do or create a custom ecosystem for them, which is most important.
And one of the things, Scott, I want to come back to you on this. You and I have had discussions about the innovation curve going on right now in surgery. And I'd like to say it's probably at the most steepest rate that we've seen in a long time. If you start to fold in imaging, ICG, data, analytics, predictive analytics, et cetera, stapling even, I'll even go down to the fundamental. Mm-hmm. But that innovation, that ramp of that innovation curve versus a flat curve, you and I have had conversations about this, and you've got a very clear thesis philosophy around that.
Keep going.
Yeah. So I mean, we're in a very high innovation curve. And if we look at the organization that created soft tissue surgical robotics, Intuitive, right, we go down robots, instruments, stapling, advanced instrumentation, visualization, advanced visualization, data, AI, telepresence, right? Those are all on incredibly high ramp innovation curves. When you try and bundle them all together, you lose that optionality.
Yeah. Two things. Look, they had a protected position for 20 years, given their IP. They did what they did. They bought computer motion, and that is what it is. But I don't think anyone, would have envisioned, here we are 20 years later, and we still have this giant, robot. We don't really have the ability to do remote surgery anywhere in the world. We still only have 2.5 billion people having access to surgery out of 7.5 billion people. So I think Intuitive's done an incredible job. And there are all these obstacles with reimbursement and everything else that make things challenging. But at the same time, I think this next 10 years is going to get really, really interesting and exciting now, with more people having the freedom to operate, more competitive robots, more application-specific robots, different business models like these two are talking about. But we're back to, hey, you mentioned ICG, and I'm on the board of On Target, so we have fluorescing images for cancer. If that only worked on one system, the Intuitive system, just think of the limitations of cancer surgery. But no, we're going to be Switzerland, and Stort's system will have it, Olympus system will have it, Medtronic, Intuitive, Stryker, et cetera. That gives there the opportunity for there to be innovation, not just for us, but for 4 or 5 other companies developing imaging agents. And then you throw a Proximie in there with a layer of connectivity to then take the data and co-register things and feed it back to the robot. And when those things can all work together, things get I think, steeper and faster and better than closed systems that try and protect your interest economically solely than trying to get the best outcome.
Alor?
Yeah, I would go again kind of broader. I think we're in the business of creating value, and I think the incredible innovation ecosystem here is creating value and trying to build companies and have an impact on surgery. I think we should acknowledge that surgeons and healthcare systems want to deliver surgery, right? They're not necessarily thinking down to the minutiae of that individual platform. They're looking for the much bigger turnkey outcome. And if you go all the way to the payer, that I think is increasingly relevant as we think about value-based surgery and quality being a driver, they're looking for savings. They're looking for high-quality outcomes for their members, for their patients. So I think it's incumbent on the innovators to show up to that environment. The reality is there's a customer there with a certain set of expectations, with a solution that is compelling and is aligned to the set of metrics that are important to that end customer. And I think that's increasingly in this environment about whether revenue growth, it's about reimbursement. Can you create more reimbursement around these procedures? Can you support growth within a surgical program? It's about efficiency. Can you actually really move the needle around savings, around staffing ratios? And so I suppose I would love us to kind of focus on the constructive, which is how do innovators that are coming from a perspective of feeling like they're open kind of show up with the kind of breadth of solution that can move the needle for the end customer. And that might mean in a really exciting...
So as an ex-intuitive person, I'm pushing back on you. Are we creating value for only our investors and value for the clinician, value for the patient?
I think quality...
So Intuitive for how many years has been able to make an instrument that you can re-sterilize 50 times, but they don't do it. If it was an open system, people would be making instruments that could be re-sterilized 100 times, but no, it's limited to 10, only for their economics, which limits the accessibility of the technology to help patients around the world that don't have the economics to afford it. We need to get out of that. I mean, I just like that's you have to go into the minutia of those kinds of situations to fix this and progress to get this technology, which helps patients, to more people and democratize it around the world.
I think that's right. For me, in our business model, quality first. I'm not here to litigate Intuitive. I don't work.
No, fair enough.
But I believe
it's frustrating.
Sure, but I think the constructive is how do we show up and create solutions that are going to meet the needs and kind of settle that. And I think, frankly, again, slightly off topic, but that's business model innovation, or it's having very clear, demonstrable ROI for the metrics that matter in these environments. And so to me, that is the focus here, rather than necessarily litigating Intuitive's role historically.
So Greg, I want to get on you for a second here, and Oliver, and then Scott. So do the sites of care determine the ROI? And do the sites of care determine the use case and acuity on the patient? And so are we taking a robot that may be appropriate for one venue, but now outpatient surgery, ambulatory surgical centers, and still hospital, we're able to push that out to a lower cost center? Does that matter?
I think it really does. I mean, I think, to go back to maybe a little bit of what Scott was saying, I mean, there is a barrier, whether that's economic, and you just brought up one economic example, but there's logistical examples. I mean, form factor matter, complexity matters. And when you don't have choice or optionality, you don't even have that option. So I think bringing some of these things to the market will, we're going to see, I mean, we've already seen it in orthopedics. I mean, I think when I started in orthopedic robotics, very few total knees were being done in an outpatient ASC setting for a lot of different reasons. Now it's more than half, and the reimbursement has trailed and followed. So I think we're at the precipice of that type of action in soft tissue. The lower acuity, high volume surgery is going to the place that's best for the surgeon, but also best for the patient. So many stories since and really before our FDA approval, I'm hearing people moving or shifting patient flow because of where the robot sits, not where the robot should be, or where the patient should be served. So that is really, for me, part of the paradox that we have to try and solve in the next few years.
Oliver, you're nodding your head on that.
Yeah, I think the future of surgery will be outpatient until proven otherwise. I think complex care can happen, does happen in the outpatient setting. And I think business models, approaches, technology access that enable that will thrive, in the outpatient setting. And so, I think quality becomes a really important determinant, for some of the business model innovation. But in terms of aligning again with the type of care, I think, total knees and total joints is a fantastic example where you're seeing surgeons that are more comfortable taking those procedures in the outpatient setting, utilizing that technology. As you think about a driver for adoption, that's an incredibly strong motivator, to be able to create a successful outpatient, total knees, total hips program enabled through technology. And that aligns you with the surgeon if they're co-owning these surgical centers, aligns you with the payers. So I think, again, finding those win-wins with technology, again, whether it's open or closed. And I think if you're open, it's about partnering and identifying kind of a more expansive solution set. But so I think that's where the opportunity is.
Scott, you mentioned before OTL and Target Labs, and you sit on a couple other obviously boards. What does an open architecture robot format versus closed do for ongoing innovation and the investment community?
Yeah, first of all, kind of wrap it on that last point. Again, I look at hospitals like I do shopping centers. They're just obsolete, high cost, deliverers or manufacturers, and we need to move towards application specific manufacturing and smaller, low cost environments that can have better service and care. And this ties into your question. You need innovation of technology that fits into that better. So whether it's like Hyperfine with a portable MRI that can be in a center that then could have a robot attached to it in an application-specific center to do a surgery. These things, like everything, continues with technology to get smaller, faster, cheaper, and I think the ability to have open platforms allows you to optimize back to the point that was made earlier to best in class for that. And it allows different solutions for different delivery sites as well, which then creates opportunity and investment follows to feed it.
Yeah, because, when you look around in LSI, these are all the innovators. And if you don't give them a playing field to play on, meaning investment dollars, access to that, pathway through a successful outcome, and a system to plug into that is a meritocracy, not an autocracy. What does that do for innovation from your perspective?
Well, if you see it, like you mentioned in orthopedics, where there's multiple robots for knees, a lot of procedures move to outpatient, and now it's more competitive. There's more innovation, and it becomes more of a standard of care. Like soft tissue robotics is not a standard of care like it probably will be here in the next 10 or 15 years across multiple applications with more competition and more applications. We're just behind some of these other areas like in orthopedics at this point, which started later.
Maybe one comment from an investment perspective, having run a company with a closed platform and having run a company with an open platform, when you look at the verticals you mentioned, 6 or 7 verticals that you mentioned, to master all of those also takes dollars. So we talk all the time that robotics is not easy, but either is visualization, either is stapling, either is advanced energy. All of these things come with tails. And so from an investor perspective, the more I think innovation can spawn off focus. And so if you have 6 independent companies running those verticals, it's going to happen faster. It's likely going to be better. And it's probably more palatable for an investor. When we talk dollars in soft tissue robotics and see, all the players out there, it's expensive. But if you look at a lot of those platforms, they're trying to solve everything. And that is it's an impossibility. They will never be number one in every category across the ecosystem that a soft tissue robot provides. So, for me, I think it actually is, we talk about partnership all the time because the ecosystem shouldn't be about me or, any other robotic company. It should be about the surgeon, the patient, the procedure, and what's best.
Yeah, and what I see happening now, from my vantage point, with the open versus closed systems, is in the next 5 years, collaboration is going to happen at the top, competition is going to happen at the bottom. And so as we have all these providers of technologies, whether it's a stapler, whether it's visualization, whether it's new camera technology, these all become massive unlocks, and you'll have that collaboration at the top. And we have to remember, this is not a zero-sum game. This is an expansion of the existing market. So this is actually healthy for the market and not a detriment, I think, to the Intuitive market. And, I'm a huge shareholder of Intuitive, and anybody with intelligence is a shareholder of Intuitive, right? But the emerging market itself is important. Oliver, because of the business you're in, and when you come in and we look at your business model, you've got to make a decision as a business owner. Well, I've got a Stryker stack, or I've got a Stort stack, and I've got great energy equipment here. Do I push that all aside for a robot?
I think, again, it goes back. So as an owner and operator of surgical centers, and in a model that is not dissimilar to the current kind of status quo, which is co-ownership with surgeons, which is the ultimate alignment. And when you layer in quality, it's a powerful thing to be aligned with our surgeon partners to raise the bar of quality while having a pulse on the economics of every decision that we make in our surgical centers, high quality being our North Star. It comes down to quality. It comes down to robust discussion and evidence and data. But cost, really is a factor. Simplicity, alignment in terms of business model. Consumptive pricing is a powerful thing in the outpatient setting. The cash flows of surgical centers can be tight, and I think capital investment is a significant barrier. But really, it's about understanding the growth potential. I think where I've seen medtech innovation show up and really capture the attention of surgeons and facility owners, does this provide with at least a quality match or quality improvement, a new revenue stream? Is this growth? Is this new surgeon activity that can happen in this setting of care? So these are types of decisions. I think, again, open versus closed. Stryker's a great example because they do have a full stack. They're in the business of financing surgical centers. So, they have found this kind of breadth of solution that they can offer. But the last thing I'll say is, the reality is there's a lot of individual decisions to make at a surgical center. The inventory list is tens and tens and tens of pages long. So there's a lot of space, and especially as we think about multi-specialty ASCs for a range of technologies, but I think we have to think about it programmatically. How am I delivering this? What is the outcome of this clinical specialty or, this surgeon stakeholder group that I need to support and make sure that they can maintain their practice in this outpatient setting and be profitable. And in an ASC versus a hospital, I've heard the term good enough is good enough in an ASC. Have you heard that?
Yeah. So, you said two things. You're always going to over-index on quality, of course, but when you start to move centers, then profit does matter. So sometimes good enough is good enough, and that could go to the product or the clinical approach, because things radically change relative to reimbursement when you move to the site of care. Although I think long-term, again, we've seen it, reimbursement usually finds a way. This is very good in my mind for the payers as well to shift a lot of these types of procedures into this setting. It's good for everyone, but you don't always have the story when you lead there, right? So you're going to have multiple specialties that are trying to get there, but are really trying to find a way. So that's when good is good enough, and you hear that all the time. Yeah. But I do think, and I implore this community, the opportunity is to measure, all these ROI elements and kind of meet these stakeholders, where they're at in terms of the ASC dynamics, because, ASCs as a category here, the ultimate kind of cost of care savings opportunity in terms of site service shift, it was exempt from meaningful use. There's only about 20% of surgical centers have an EHR. You're looking at digitally naive footprints of surgical consumers. And so I think the opportunity to build the data lies on the medical innovators. And so I think that's a challenge, but it's also an opportunity to show up with quality, to show up with cost improvement, because good enough is good enough
is well said, but not many people really understand what good even is because there isn't significant amount of data. And so I think that's a really big opportunity for innovators in this space.
Yeah, true.
Scott, you've always been a visionary from way back when on where care is going, where technology is going, where there are going to be collisions of opportunity and collisions of destruction. So where does surgery go for the patient over the next 10 years?
I think we've got a whole host of technologies which are going to make it more accessible and make the technology more accessible to more clinicians to deliver it. Robotics, AI, precision-guided tools that they're going to improve outcomes dramatically and reduce costs. And we have all the tools to make those three objectives happen in significant ways so that, I'm bashing Intuitive a bit here at the beginning, but I think we can thank them. They've created this opportunity where we're going to go from, teens penetration in procedures, to where this becomes standard of care here over the next, 10 years. And a lot of that will aggregate to them. But like you said, the market will grow bigger and there'll be opportunities for guys like these two guys' companies to participate and create a lot of value, which then just feeds the snowball of more investment, which then is going to continue to improve visualization, which is going to include imaging agents, include navigation, include smaller, faster application-specific robots, and the like. So I'm super, super excited about the area and the potential for the next 10 years and what's coming. So and that's on a global basis,
right?
Not like a U.S. basis, which the market has primarily been, for the era of Intuitive. Now you're seeing robots being built around the world. They're going to populate those different environments as well.
So you're standing on the betting line as we're in our last 2 minutes here, and I want to hit Oliver and Greg with the same question. You had to bet open or closed?
I think it's going to be a mix. I think there's certain parts that Intuitive is going to keep closed and certain things that they're going to have as open. I mean, they've been open to a degree historically, like you can use your Stryker camera with it. I think there's going to be innovation where they could say, hey, I'm going to buy that and put it onto my platform. If they do that and don't allow it to be on other platforms, it's going to limit the potential of that particular product, given more things are going to be out there on the market. So I think I'm optimistic that it'll be a hybrid and there'll be a more open elements than there have been historically.
Greg?
Yeah, I mean, I would be silly if I didn't say open, I think.
You're kind of biased, but
yeah. No, open. And, really for me, if I had to make one bet, so Scott just stayed in the middle, which was convenient, but I'm kidding.
I took the middle.
No, but, look, if we want to push innovation, it can't be closed. So I do agree, though, just sheer market share, what's out there today, it's going to be, I think open will be growing. I think there's a lot of adjacent technologies that people will want that they won't have access to on a standard mainframe robotic system. So I do think I see a higher prevalence of open 10 years from now, much higher prevalence than you do today.
Oliver, bring us home.
I think in 10 years, we won't be talking about robotics being open or closed. I think we're going to talk about vertically integrated surgical care models that span sites of care. And I think we're going to be talking about the rest of the healthcare system. And I think that's where the opportunity will be.
Agreed. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for your thoughts and always provocative insights on things. And please give it up for my audience, for my panel.